Damn it all to the void, Lyrian muttered, pacing across her living room as the message cube pulsed on the polished stone table. Its soft glow filled the air with an insistent hum, each flicker a reminder of the obligation she couldn't ignore. The council wanted her in the capital within 24 hours. Attendance was not optional. She pressed her palms against the cool glass of the panoramic window, staring out at the alien expanse beyond. Jagged purple mountains stretched into the horizon like the spines of slumbering beasts, their peaks wreathed in silver mist. Sunlight poured down in twin shafts from Arvin's two suns, casting the valleys in shades of green and gold. It should have been beautiful. It was beautiful. But not even this view could quiet the storm in her head. Behind her, the storm had teeth. A low rumble rolled through the room, deep as distant thunder. Lyrian turned slowly to find Asgar sprawled across the living room floor, his massive body coiled with the deceptive grace of a predator at rest. Blue fur, striped black like shattered obsidian, rippled with every measured breath. His yellow eyes burned like twin suns, fixing on her with unnerving intelligence. At full height, his shoulders would nearly reach her chest. Fangs the length of her fingers gleamed as he yawned lazily, a gesture that sent a shiver down her spine. Despite the years they'd spent together, "You don't make this easy." "You know," she murmured, dropping to her knees and scratching behind the curved horns that crowned his head. His fur vibrated under her touch, the sound of his purr like a tremor beneath the floor. "Just a big softy," she whispered, though both of them knew that wasn't true, not entirely. Her wrist communicator pulsed with another notification. Lyrian groaned, tapping it open to reveal a string of names: colleagues, friends, anyone with a shred of experience in Xenofauna care. She had called them all, and the answer had been the same every time. "Are you insane?" No one handles a Phaladrax but its bonded keeper, unless they want to end up as meat by the third refusal. Her pride had given way to desperation. By the fifth, she was ready to cancel the council meeting entirely. She sank into the couch, Asgar lifting his massive head to rest it in her lap, like an oversized, lethal cat. Her fingers combed through the silken blue fur as a knot of frustration tightened in her chest. What was she going to do? The door chime shattered the silence. Lyrian's head snapped up, her pulse spiking. No one came here, not without warning. Her mountain home was 3 hours from the nearest settlement, perched on a cliff carved into violet stone. Visitors were just rare. They were unthinkable. "Asgar," she whispered. The beast's ears flicked forward, muscles rippling as he rose to his feet in one fluid, predatory motion. The growl that rolled from his chest was no longer lazy, it was a warning. Lyrian crossed to the security panel and activated the feed, and froze. A human stood on her doorstep, tall, broad-shouldered, his sun-browned skin a contrast to the pale stone behind him. Short blonde hair caught the afternoon light. A thick beard framed a smile so relaxed it made her jaw tighten in disbelief. He wore simple travel gear, dust-streaked boots, and the casual confidence of someone who hadn't just climbed into the jaws of death. What in the stars? She opened the door, keeping one hand against the frame, the other hovering near the control. "For the energy barrier. Can I help you?" Her voice was cool, professional, though her pulse thrummed like a trapped bird. The man's blue eyes, bright and possibly human, crinkled at the corners as his smile deepened. "Name's Dylan," he said easily. "Heard you need someone to look after your pet." Lyrian blinked, certain she'd misheard. "How did you—" "Small community," he interrupted with a shrug. "Word travels fast when someone's desperate." Before she could speak again, a snarl split the air. Asgar thundered into the room, fur bristling, fangs bared, the embodiment of every horror whispered in Arvenian folklore. His roar shook the walls, a sound forged in the bones of predators older. then the stars, and Dylan didn't flinch. He crouched slowly, his movements calm, deliberate, meeting the predator's blazing gaze without a trace of fear. "Well," he murmured, his voice low and warm, as if greeting an old friend, "aren't you magnificent?" Lyrian's breath caught, and then, to her utter disbelief, Dylan extended a hand palm down, steady as stone as the deadliest creature. On Arvin stalked closer, rumbling like an oncoming storm. What happened next should have been impossible. Asgar sniffed once, twice, then lowered his massive head and bumped it gently against Dylan's hand. Lyrian could only stare. And for the first time in years, the woman who had mastered the fiercest predators in the Vidian range felt completely out of control. Lyrian's breath came in shallow waves as the impossible unfolded before her eyes. The apex predator that had shredded hardened mercenaries, that had reduced reinforced alloy cages to ribbons, was now melting under the touch of a human stranger. Asgar's fur rippled as Dylan's hand slid behind one curved ear, scratching with the ease of someone greeting a house pet. "That's impossible," she whispered, her voice barely more than a tremor. Dylan glanced back at her blue eyes, catching the sunlight streaming through the wide windows. "He doesn't seem to think so," he said lightly, as though this wasn't a moment that rewrote entire safety protocols across the system. Asgar's massive body lowered, coiling on. The floor, the growl that once promised violence, had softened to something like a purr, a deep, rumbling vibration that tremored through the polished stone beneath their feet. Lyrian stared, pulse racing. She had devoted 7 cycles to studying Philandra behavior, and never had she seen this. "He doesn't let anyone near him," she said, almost to herself. "Not even my colleagues. He's mauled 3 people this week for trying." Dylan chuckled softly, his hand gliding from Asgar's ears to the sleek blue fur along his neck. "And they approached him wrong," he said simply, his tone utterly matter of fact. "Creatures like him, they read energy. If you meet aggression with fear or control, they'll push back. Respect them, and they respect you." Respect? Lyrian blinked, stunned. The notion was absurd, and yet here was living proof purring at Dylan's feet. Dylan rose smoothly to his full height, brushing his palms together. The movement drew her eyes unwillingly to the breadth of his shoulders, the way his simple travel. Gear clung to the hard lines of muscle, earned from real work, not idle luxury. He moved like someone who trusted his body, like someone who had spent a lifetime surviving, not theorizing from behind sterile lab walls. "So," he said with an easy grin, "about that job." The job. Her mind struggled to keep up, clinging to rationality like a lifeline. "You're serious?" "Why wouldn't I be?" Dylan tilted his head, sunlight catching in the short waves of his blonde hair. 5 days of peace and quiet in the mountains? Sounds perfect. Peace and quiet. The words felt almost obscene when spoken in the same breath as Asgar. "You're not afraid of him?" she asked finally, unable to keep the disbelief from her voice. "Afraid?" Dylan's grin widened, warm and unshaken. "Look at him. He's a big kitty who likes belly rubs." Lyrian almost laughed, almost except. Her voice caught in her throat as Dylan crouched again and, to her utter horror, tapped his thigh invitingly. Asgar flopped onto his side with a heavy thud, exposing his underside in a gesture of complete trust. A beast that had ripped apart armored assault drones rolled like a docile pet under the hands of a man she had met not 5 minutes ago. "Oh, by the stars?" Lyrian whispered, sinking onto the couch as if her knees could no longer hold her. Her mind raced, colliding with itself in chaos. How? Why? And unwelcome, inconvenient. Who is this man? She realized she was staring when Dylan looked up, his eyes locking on hers with a spark that felt almost tangible across the space between them. For one suspended breath, neither of them moved, Then he smiled, slow, self-assured, dangerous in a way no predator could match. "I think," he said, his voice dropping to something that brushed like velvet against her nerves, "we're going to get along just fine." The words rippled through her like a current, breaking something loose. Deep inside, she managed to nod just barely, as Asgar purred louder, as if agreeing with every word. And for the first time since her call for help, Lyrian wondered if the real disruption in her carefully ordered life wasn't the feral beast at her feet, but the human standing before her. Asterisk. Lyrian returned 3 days earlier than planned, her shuttle slicing through the thin mountain mist like a silver blade. The council session had imploded, Southern delegates storming out in a fury over trade sanctions, and though she was furious at the wasted time, a sliver of relief threaded through her frustration. She'd spent every hour of the journey home picturing Asgar, picturing Dylan, wondering against all sense what she would find when she walked through her door. She wanted to believe everything was fine, wanted to believe Dylan's reckless. Confidence had held. Yet her stomach coiled tighter the closer the shuttle drew to her. Stone-carved sanctuary. The front doors whispered open to silence. Too much silence, Asgar? Her voice cracked the still air like a stone into a lake. No answering growl. No heavy footfalls. Her pulse spiked. Every cell in her body screamed that something was wrong. She moved through the house with predatory grace, senses flaring until a sound stopped her dead in her tracks. A splash, followed by a deep, resonant purr. Lyrian's brow furrowed. Purr? Heart hammering, she followed the sound to the rear courtyard, stepping through the archway, and froze. The sight hit her like a physical blow. Dylan stood knee-deep in her bathing pool, water lapping around his calves. His shirt was gone, discarded, carelessly on a carved stone bench. Sunlight poured over the hard planes of his chest, gilding each curve of muscle in molten gold. Water dripped from his skin in rivulets, sliding down over ridges of sinew to vanish beneath the low-slung waistband of his soaked pants. But none of that, none of it, was what stole her breath. What stole her breath was the beast beside him. Asgar, apex predator, terror of the Vidian range. The very creature who had shredded an assault drone in front of her 2 years ago now sat hip-deep in the water, covered in white suds. A giant, blue-furred killing machine, melting under the human's hands as Dylan scrubbed his massive shoulders. With a sponge the size of her head, the purr she'd heard wasn't her imagination. It rolled from Asgar's throat like distant thunder, vibrating the stones beneath her feet. His golden eyes were half-lidded in bliss. What are you doing?" The words ripped from her throat in a strangled gasp. Dylan glanced over his shoulder, surprise flashing across his sun-bronzed features, before his mouth curved into a grin so slow and devastating it made her stomach dip. "Oh, hey, you're back early. Answer me," she demanded, voice pitching higher than she intended. "You? Are you bathing him?" "Yeah," Dylan said easily, dragging the sponge down Asgar's spine. Muscles flexed in his forearm. As he worked, water catching in the fine hair on his skin. "Why? Why?" Lyrian's voice cracked into a laugh that was half hysterical. "Because Faladra don't bathe. They're water-averse. They have self-cleaning glands." "Do you have any idea?" "Relax," Dylan cut in, and damn him, his tone was gentle, calm, as if she were the one being unreasonable. He rolled in mud after chasing something. "I figured he needed help. Look," he gestured to the giant predator who was currently leaning into his touch like a spoiled kitten. "Does this look like a creature in distress to you?" As if on cue, Asgar rumbled in pleasure, shifting his weight to present his other side for scrubbing. Dylan laughed softly, the sound low and warm, sinking into her like sunlight after a storm. Liri, and opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. Her mind, a fortress of reason, was crumbling, brick by brick, under the sheer insanity of what she was witnessing. And then Asgar shook himself. A tidal wave of soapy water slammed into her, drenching the silver fabric of her formal council tunic until it clung like a second skin. Cold liquid slid down the curves of her body in shameless rivulets, beating on her emerald skin before dripping to the tiles below. Dylan's laughter hit her like a spark, rich and unrestrained. "Sorry about that," he said, eyes glinting, as they traveled slowly, deliberately, from her soaked shoulders to the cling of fabric over her hips. "He's got quite the shake." She should have been furious, should have summoned every ounce of Arvenian dignity and scalded him with words sharp enough to cut alloy. Instead, she felt her cheeks burn with a heat that had nothing to do with the water. "You," her voice broke. She dragged in a breath that scraped against her throat. "You're insane." "Maybe," Dylan said, his smile deepening as he stepped from the pool, water streaming down his body in silver ribbons. He stopped only when he was close enough that the heat radiating from his skin brushed her chilled flesh like a phantom touch. "Or maybe," he murmured, blue eyes locking on hers with an intensity that stole the air from her lungs, "I just see what everyone else is too afraid to look at." The words hummed through her, tangling with the thundering beat of her pulse. Behind them, Asgar purred louder, tail swishing like a satisfied sentinel. And in that charged, breathless instant, Lyrian understood something with terrifying clarity. Predator wasn't the most dangerous creature in her courtyard. Not anymore. Asterisk, the harsh chime of the panel shattered the stillness of dawn. Lyrian jerked awake, the silvery drape of her night cloak sliding from her shoulders as she stumbled toward the glowing console. Her pulse was still erratic, though whether from sleep or the memory of Dylan's hands yesterday, strong and sure as they coaxed Asgar into docile bliss, she didn't care to examine. She activated the transmission. Counselor Merrick's stern, orange-skinned visage filled the air, his features sharp as the council crest behind him. "Xenobiologist Lyrian," he began, voice cold enough to frost steel, "your abrupt departure from the capital has raised concerns." "I fulfilled my obligations," she replied evenly, summoning every scrap of control. The Southern delegation dissolved the session. There was no reason to remain. "That wasn't your decision to make." His eyes narrowed, glinting with suspicion. "Furthermore, reports have surfaced of unusual activity at your residence." Lyrian's breath snagged. "Reports?" "From your neighbor, Researcher Valen. He observed a human male on your premises." Merrick's gaze hardened. "You failed to register an off-world guest. That's a violation of interspecies protocol." Before she could frame a response, movement stirred at the edge of her vision. Dylan emerged from the adjoining chamber, hair tousled, wearing nothing but loose drawstring pants slung low on his hips. His chest was bare, sun-bronzed and marked by faint scars that spoke of battles fought far from this mountain sanctuary. "Everything okay?" His voice husky, threaded with sleep, rolled across the room like a slow tide. Merrick's expression darkened to the color of bruised fruit. "I see the reports were accurate," he bit out. "Expect investigators by midday." "And Lyrian?" His gaze sliced to Dylan, then back to her. "The council will also require a full accounting of your association. Until then, you are under observation." The transmission severed, leaving only the chill echo of his threat. Lyrian turned. Slowly, Dylan stood framed in the soft morning light, one arm braced against the doorframe, his posture loose but alert. Concern flickered in those impossible blue eyes. "That didn't sound good," he said quietly. She swallowed hard, the weight of consequences crashing down like an avalanche. Unauthorized human presence. Potential accusations of species interference. And stars help her Asgar's evolving behavior. If they suspected even half of what Dylan had discovered. "They'll come for him," she whispered, her voice raw. "They'll take Asgar to a research facility. Treat him like a lab specimen." Dylan crossed the distance in 3 long strides, his hand warm as it closed over hers. "Then we don't let them." She stared up at him, stunned. "You don't understand. Defying the council isn't optional?" His mouth curved into that reckless grin that made her insides twist in ways she had no vocabulary for. "Neither is letting them destroy him." Her breath hitched as his fingers tightened, grounding her in a reality she both feared and craved. "I can't." "Yes, you can," he murmured, stepping closer until his warmth seeped through the fragile barrier of her self-control. His scent clean water, wild air, something wholly human wrapped around her, making thought a distant echo. "You're brilliant, Lyrian. Brave. You fought half the Vidian range to save that creature because you believed in him. Believe in yourself now. Stars above. How did he do this?" Sliced through centuries of conditioning with words that burned like starlight against her skin, her protest withered on her tongue. Instead, she heard herself whisper, "And if they come for you?" His smile softened, slow as dawn breaking. "Then they'll have to go through a very stubborn human." Something inside her broke quietly, irrevocably. Before she could stop herself, she reached up, fingers trembling as they brushed the line of his jaw. His breath caught, his eyes darkening in a way that sent a shiver down her spine. And then he kissed her. No pretense, no permission sought, just raw, human honesty crashing into her like a meteor storm. His mouth was warm and demanding, tasting faintly of the night they hadn't shared, but both had imagined. Her knees buckled. His arm swept around her waist, anchoring her against the solid heat of his body as the world tilted off its axis. They broke apart, breathless. The air between them vibrated with something wild and unstoppable. "This," she swallowed hard, dizzy with it. "This is madness." "Maybe," Dylan murmured, his forehead resting against hers, his voice low rasp that curled heat deep in her core. "Or maybe it's the first thing that's made sense in a long time." The knock wasn't a knock. It was a pounding, sharp and merciless against the reinforced steel of her front doors. The sound reverberated through the mountain home like the heartbeat of a predator closing in. Lyrian stiffened in the center of the living room, fingers curling against her palms as Dylan stepped forward, calm in a way that sent both dread and something darker spiraling through her chest. The council was early. She had prayed for hours more, minutes even, but fate had never favored her. "Stay here," she whispered, though the command rang hollow the instant his blue eyes caught hers. "Not a chance," Dylan murmured back. There was steel in his voice, the same tempered edge she'd glimpsed when he coaxed a feral predator into gentleness with nothing but trust. He wasn't just calm. He was ready. The door control chimed as Lyrian keyed in the override. With a hiss, the barrier slid open. Inspector Dorn filled the threshold like a storm cloud in tailored armor, his violet skin darkened by the coastal sun, eyes hard as carved stone. Behind him, 2 security officers gripped shock lances, their stances rigid with protocol. "Xenobiologist Lyrian," Dorn said, his voice cold enough to frost iron. "Step aside." Her throat tightened. "Inspector, protocol violations. Unauthorized off-worlder." His gaze sliced past her like a blade and locked on Dylan. "And a human." Disgust laced the word, sharp and deliberate. "You were ordered to register his presence." "Wasn't aware breathing needed registration," Dylan said mildly, but there was a dangerous gleam under the ease of his tone. His shoulders squared as if daring Dorn to push. Dorn's eyes narrowed. "You'll regret that insolence. Where's the Feladrax?" The rumble answered for her. Asgar padded into view from the shadows of the adjoining hall, his blue fur gleaming like molten sapphire in the filtered light. His eyes burned molten gold as they locked on the intruders. A low growl rippled through the air, vibrating the glass of the panoramic windows. The officers stiffened. One reached for his weapon. "Don't," Dylan said softly, and a single syllable stopped them cold. He stepped forward, slow and sure, placing himself between the predator and the lances trained on its heart. "You'll spook him." "You have no authority here, human," Dorn snapped. "Neither do you in my home." Lyrian cut in, voice slicing through the tension like a blade. Her pulse thundered, but her spine held straight. "Inspector, Asgar is bonded. He poses no threat." "He's a class of predator," Dorn spat. "Your reckless behavior could destabilize our entire biosafety mandate." His gesture was sharp. "Final. Sedate him." The words were barely out when Asgar lunged not at the officers, but to Dylan's side, pressing close, fangs bared in silent promise. One flick of his tail sent a vase shattering against the far wall. Weapons hissed. As they powered up, Lyrian's heart plummeted. "Stop!" she cried, but the shout barely pierced the roar of her own blood. Her gaze snapped to Dylan. He wasn't afraid. He wasn't moving to surrender. Instead, he glanced back at her, just a flick of blue eyes. Like lightning in a storm, and everything inside her locked into place. This wasn't ending here. "Not like this. Pack light," Dylan said, voice low enough only she could hear. "We move now." Time fractured into motion. Lyrian spun, snatching her datapads and core samples, her research crammed into a satchel with trembling hands. Behind her, Dylan moved like a soldier fluid, efficient as he keyed a command into his wristband that sent her rear garage doors sliding open to the cold embrace of night. The officers advanced. Asgar roared, a sound that shook the bones of the mountain. And then they were gone, slipping through the back exit into the hover transport as its engines whined to life. "Hang on," Dylan growled, palms flying over the controls as the craft vaulted into the obsidian sky. The lights of her home, her entire life fell away in a blur of silver mist and shadow. Behind them, the Council's pursuit craft screamed into the night. Lyrian gripped the seat, heart hammering like war drums. "They'll track us. Not if we get where I think we're going." Dylan cut in, jaw set like carved stone. His gaze flicked to the glowing map on the dash. "Asgar knows the way." The Feladrax prowled in the cargo bay, tail lashing, eyes bright as twin suns. He wasn't afraid. He was leading, through canyons carved in violet stone, across ridges wreathed in mist. The hover transport knifed into the wild heart of the Vidia range. Pursuit lights faded, swallowed by jagged spires until Dylan swung them into a ravine so narrow, Lyrian swore the hull would scrape stone. The world funneled into darkness. Then light. They burst into a hidden valley veiled by bioluminescent mist, its heart cradling a lake that shimmered like molten crystal under the twin moons. The air pulsed with life plants glowing in hues no spectrum chart could name. Trees, arching like cathedral spires crowned in silver fire. And on the banks, shapes moved. Lyrian's breath shattered. Feladra, dozens of them. Blue-furred giants, sleek and magnificent, their eyes reflecting gold fire in the night. Cubs tumbled under, watchful adults. Others sang low harmonic tones that made the air hum like a living heartbeat. Not solitary hunters, not mindless beasts, a people, a culture, a secret older than the Council's arrogance. "Oh, stars." Her voice broke on a whisper. This changes everything." Dylan cut the engines. The hover settled in silence, broken only by the chorus of alien song. His gaze found hers in the pale glow, steady and fierce. "No," he said softly, reaching for her trembling hand. "This just started everything." Asterisk, the first light of dawn, spilled over the hidden valley in molten gold, painting the bioluminescent flora in hues that stole Lyrian's breath. For a fleeting heartbeat, she could almost forget the danger crouched beyond the horizon. Almost. But the mountains could not muffle the scream of engines forever. The sound came like a knife through silk, distant at first, then rising to a shriek. That reverberated off the violet cliffs. They found us, Dylan said, voice steady as steel, even as his fingers tightened on the pulse rifle slung across his chest. His blue eyes burned against the misty glow. A warrior carved in sunrise. Lyrian's. Heart hammered, her satchel heavy with data that could upend centuries of dogma. Proof of language, culture, a sentient species dismissed as nothing more than apex predators. All of it balanced on the blade of what would happen next. Askar's head lifted sharply, ears twitching. A low, rolling growl spilled from his chest. As the first council craft breached the veil of mist, sleek and black, its engines roaring like a predator of metal and fire. Behind it, 3 escorts fanned out in formation, their armored skins glinting in the dawn. The transport slammed into the valley floor with brutal grace, dust plumed. From the craft's belly spilled council security armored, eyes cold. And at their head strode Inspector Dorn, his violet skin dark as storm clouds, mouth curved in a smile as thin as a blade. End of the line, he called, voice amplified by the valley walls. His gaze swept over Lyrian, lingering like frost on her emerald skin before flicking to Dylan. Disdain flickered in his eyes, sharp as razors. And the human hero, predictable. Lyrian stepped forward, spine rigid despite the quake in her chest. Dorn, listen to me. Everything you believe about Faladra is wrong. They're not mindless predators. They're, spare me your heresy. He sliced a hand through the air. You've violated every containment protocol on record. You've harbored an unregistered off-worlder. And now? His eyes slid toward Asgar, who prowled forward with lethal grace, muscles rippling beneath his blue and black pelt. You've turned a Class A predator into a weapon. Before Lyrian could speak, the air shifted, charged, electric. From the tree line emerged more Faladra, dozens, then scores. Their golden eyes burned like molten suns as they formed ranks in silence, their massive forms weaving through the mist with predatory elegance. Cubs huddled in the center, guarded by towering adults whose tails flicked in eerie unison. The ground vibrated beneath their synchronized steps, their low harmonic tones swelling into a living symphony that made the air thrum. What? One of the officers faltered, voice strangled. What is this? Proof, Dylan said softly. Stepping up beside Lyrian, his rifle slung low, his voice a blade of calm in a storm. You came to chain animals, but animals don't do this. As if on cue, the lead Faladra, a giant, whose pelt shimmered with indigo fire, strode forward. It stopped before Dorn, lowering its head in a gesture so deliberate it stole the breath from every throat. Then, slowly, it lifted one clawed paw and traced a series of shapes in the earth. Lyrian's heart lurched. She knew those forms. Dylan's hand signals, the same ones he taught Asgar. Only these weren't mimicry. This was language. The great beast finished its pattern, then raised its head, loosing a harmonic tone that rippled through the valley. One by one, the others joined, until the very air sang a chorus of intelligence, defiance, and something like hope. Stars above, one officer whispered, helmet lowering. They're communicating. No, Lyrian said, her voice breaking as she stepped into the rising dawn, her hair a silver halo in the mist. They're speaking. Dorn's composure cracked, fissures of doubt spider-webbing his stone face. Trained behavior, he snapped, but the edge of his voice betrayed him. Really? Dylan's smile was a weapon now, honed and merciless. He pointed to the cliffs where cubs pressed tiny paws to stone, etching spirals and glowing dust spirals that mirrored the cave markings, Lyrian had documented only hours ago. Trained behavior doesn't leave a history older than your council charters. For a moment, silence ruled a fragile, trembling thing. Then Counselor Turan's voice cut through the coms static, sharp and clear from the coms of Dorn's. Second craft. Inspector, stand down. I'm ordering a full scientific review. Dorn spun, livid. You have no. I have every authority. Turan snapped, her image blooming on the holoscreen, mounted to the lead craft. Her silver-streaked hair gleamed under the capitals. Light, her violet eyes bright with something like triumph. Lyrian, transmit your findings. Effective immediately, this valley and its inhabitants fall under emergency cultural preservation statutes. Lyrian's knees almost gave. Relief wild. And dizzying surged through her veins. Asgar pressed against her side, his massive head nudging her hip with a sound that was almost a purr. Dorn's face twisted, a man watching his empire of certainties collapse. This isn't over, he hissed. Maybe not, Dylan said, his voice quiet steel. But you've already lost the first battle. Hours later, the valley lay bathed in dusklight, its glowing flora shimmering like constellations scattered across the earth. The council craft had gone, their shadows stripped of arrogance. In their place lingered silence, the soft kind that feels like peace. Lyrian stood at the lake's edge, watching Philadra cubs splash in mineral-rich waters, their laughter like harmonics rising to the moons. Behind her, footsteps approached, sure, steady, unmistakable. You okay? Dylan's voice was low, threaded with something softer, now that the storm had passed. She turned, finding him haloed in twilight, shirt undone, hair wind-tossed from the chaos of the day. A rogue smile curved his mouth, but his eyes, stars, his eyes burned with something deeper, something meant for her alone. I should feel terrified, she admitted, breath catching as his hand brushed a damp strand of hair from her cheek. My career's in shambles. I broke 6 laws. I might never set foot in the capital again. Regrets? He asked softly. She searched his face, the strong lines, the scars, the impossible warmth, and felt the last of her walls crumble like dust on the wind. Not one. His smile deepened, slow and sure, before his mouth found hers in a kiss that tasted of starlight and wild rain. Behind them, Asgar loosed a rumble of approval, curling at their feet like a sentinel of an alliance no council could. Undue dot above the valley, the twin moons rose like witnesses as the future rewrote itself in firelight and hope, a future born from one human's defiance, an alien woman's courage. And the day a ferocious predator got his first bubble bath. The END.